हेलो फ्रेंड्स, आप सभी का निरंकारी वीडियो चैनल में स्वागत है। इस वीडियो लिंक में हम लोग मोशन इन ए प्लेन, इस चैप्टर में हम लोग पिछले वीडियो लिंक में जीरो वेक्टर और उसकी प्रॉपर्टी के बारे में देख रहे थे। उसके बाद हमने देखा था कि मल्टीप्लिकेशन ऑफ ए वेक्टर बाय ए रियल नंबर, यानी हम किसी वेक्टर को किसी रियल नंबर से मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे तो वैल्यू क्या हो जाती है, उस वेक्टर का रियल नंबर का मल्टीपल हो जाता है। तो इस वीडियो लिंक में हम देखेंगे मल्टीप्लिकेशन ऑफ ए वेक्टर बाय ए स्केलर क्वांटिटीज। मल्टीप्लिकेशन ऑफ ए वेक्टर बाय ए स्केलर क्वांटिटी, किसी वेक्टर का किसी अदिश संख्या के साथ गुणनफल। When a vector a is multiplied by a real number lambda, when a vector a is multiplied by a real number lambda, we get another vector. Lambda into a vector. The magnitude of lambda a is lambda times the value of a vector. If lambda is positive, then the direction of lambda a is direction of lambda a vector is the same as a vector, and if the value of lambda is negative, then the direction of lambda a vector is opposite to the a vector. Now we will see multiplication of a vector by a scalar quantities. If lambda is a pure number, pure number having no units or dimension, dimensions, then the units of lambda a vector is the same as that of a vector, as that of a vector which has certain, when a vector A is when a vector A is multiplied by a scalar lambda, which has certain units, the resultant of lambda A are, the resultant of lambda A are obtained by multiplying the units of A, the units of vector A is by units of scalar quantity lambda. For example, when velocity is vector by, when velocity vector is multiplied by scalar quantity mass, we get momentum. Equational form P equal to m dot v. The units of momentum are obtained. The units of momentum are obtained by multiplying the velocity by multiplying the units of velocity with units of mass. Now we will see Our next heading is addition or composition of vectors. Addition or composition of vectors. Composition of vectors. Vectors का योग. The resultant of two or more vector is that the resultant of two or more vectors is that single vector which produces the same effect, as the individual vectors, the process of adding up two or more vector. The process of adding up two or more vectors is called composition of vector. Composition of vectors. दो या दो से अधिक वेक्टर को जोड़ने की प्रक्रिया composition of vector कहलाती है. As the vector have both magnitude and direction, as the vectors have both magnitude and direction, so they cannot be added by using ordinary rules of algebra. Vectors can be added geometrically. The following three laws of vector addition. The following three laws of vectors addition can be used to add two or more vector vectors having any inclination to each other. Number first, triangle law of vector addition. Triangle law of vector addition for adding two vectors. two vectors. Number second, parallelogram vector addition. Parallelogram law of vector addition. For adding two vectors, for adding two vectors, and third is polygonal law of vector addition. Polygonal law of vectors addition, for adding more than two vectors. For adding more than two vectors. Now we will see triangle law of vector addition. Triangle law of vector addition. If two vectors can be represented both in, if two vectors can be represented both in magnitude and direction by the two sides of a triangle, by the two sides of a triangle taken in the same order, taken in the same order, then the resultant is represented, then their resultant can be represented by completely both in magnitude, completely both in magnitude and in direction by the third side of triangle, by the third side of triangle taken in the opposite vector, taken in the opposite vector. Suppose we wish to add two vectors, A vector and B vector. Suppose we wish to add two vectors, A vector and B vector. Draw a vector OP. Draw a vector OP equal and parallel to equal and parallel to a vector from head P of OP, from head P of OP vector, draw a vector PQ, draw a vector PQ equal and parallel to B vector. Then resultant vector is given by OQ vector which joins the tail of A, A vector and head of B vector, Here is A vector and this is B vector. The summation of vector will be these two vectors will be parallel to A vector and from head of A vector this is B vector and resultant will be this is O, P, Q and OQ vector is resultant vector. According to triangle law of vector addition, triangle law of vector addition, OQ vector equal to OP vector plus PQ vector and resultant vector are equal A vector plus B vector. Now we will see parallelogram law of vector addition. Parallelogram of vector addition. If two vectors can be represented, both in magnitude and direction, by the two adjacent side of parallelogram, sides of a parallelogram drawn from a common point, then the resultant is completely represented. their resultant is completely represented both in magnitude and direction. Both in magnitude and direction by the diagonal of parallelogram. By the diagonal of parallelogram drawn from that point. Drawn from that point. Now we will see polygonal law of vector addition. In mathematical form, this is a vector and this is b vector. A vector and b vector. Then we will see from tail of vector A. This is b vector, and from this is b vector, and from head of vector B, second vector is drawn, that is a vector, and from tail of vector A we add the head of vector B, and this is a resultant vector. Now we will see polygonal law of vector addition. Polygonal law of vector addition. Polygonal law of vector addition. If a number of vectors are represented by number of vectors represented by both magnitude and direction by the sides of an open polygonal taken in the same order, then the resultant is represented. Both in magnitude and direction. Both in magnitude and direction by the closing sides of polygonal. By the closing sides of the polygon taken in opposite order. order. Vector addition is a properties of vector addition. Properties of vector addition. Vector addition is cumulative. Number first, vector addition is cumulative. वेक्टर एडिशन क्या होता है? क्रम विनिमेय होता है. The sides OP and OQ of a parallelogram. The sides OP vector and OQ vector are the parallelogram. OPSQ represent A vector and B vector. According to parallelogram law of vector addition, according to parallelogram law of vector addition, diagonal OS gives the resultant vector. Thus, OP vector plus OQ vector equal OS vector or A vector plus B vector equal to OS vector, as OP equal to QS, as OP vector equal to QS vector and OP parallel to QS and OP vector parallel to QS vector. Using triangle law of vector addition. Using triangle law of vector addition, OS vector equal to OQ vector plus QS vector. Then B vector plus A vector equal to QS vector. Then it becomes A vector plus B vector equal to QS vector and B vector plus A vector equal to QS vector. Then it becomes A vector plus B vector equal B vector plus A vector. This shows the cumulative property of vector addition. Vector addition is associative. vector addition is associative. Now we will see the property of vector addition is associative in my next video link. So you are requested to wait for my next video. Thanks.